So let's take you straight to the Bridget Mamandla Justice College. This is where we find my colleague Anka Ayanda Nyati to bring us a summation of everything that has been stated thus far just before the tea adjournment. A very good morning to you yet again, Ayanda. It seems an inordinate amount of time has been spent on the Section 27 affidavit, specifically with commissioners asking if Advocate Johnson was correct in soliciting that Section 27 affidavit from Fadel Adams. She has, of course, stated or attempted to state that she didn't necessarily solicit, but had indicated that he must be contacted thereafter there was a Section 27 affidavit.
Yeah, and if that is true, the question still remains, Mfundo, and it is why. Why would IDEC go directly to Fadel Adams? And in fact, to what end, especially where you consider what IDEC ultimately investigated later on. But let's take a couple of steps back, Mfundo, to at least place for our viewer why it was so important for the Commission to spend as much time on this as they did. And for that, we bring in our senior reporter, Kenny Mapanga, who's been with us here at the Bridget Mamandla Justice College and listened in to that testimony. Kenny, let's begin at November 2025. That's when this letter from the police ministry was apparently sent to IDEC. Help us place what this letter said and why it was so important.
All right, indeed. So we are testing a number of themes at this particular point. It's alleged political interference, but also trying to get behind the true motive behind the actions of IDEC in this regard in relation to the allegations that this was allegedly some form of a fight back by this particular unit that was allegedly being used in that crime intelligence SABC factional battle, if we could put it that way. So essentially, it becomes clear that the Section 27 referral, that is actually not a referral, actually came from the Ministry of Police. That is the Chief of Staff of Minister of Police, Senzo Mchunu, who is now on a leave of absence, that is Cedric Kabinde. He sends a letter detailing issues about the interception of dockets. Now, that particular clarity is going to be quite important as the testimony advances, because it's now going to be a question as to how did IDEC get to a case of fraud and corruption through elements such as allegedly the abuse of the Secret Service fund, the appointment of somebody from BMW into the crime intelligence in a very senior role, and alleged fraud and corruption. How did you go from that to this particular complaint? So there's a number of issues with the alleged conduct of Advocate Andrea Johnson in this regard. For some time, she's tried to distance herself as if there's a team that gets the referral and they're the ones who act out of their own free will. It's now established that she is the one that gives the instructions. Everything happens at her instance. It's not something where they can go and act out of their own volition and do as they please in the investigation. So that's why you see the Commission's bench continuing to remind her that these are your instructions, these are your decisions.
Yeah, you triggered the process.
Absolutely. So on that letter, that is actually not a Section 27 referral. The question is, how then did the IDEC, or rather the head, Advocate Andrea Johnson, then instruct her chief investigator, Mr. Peramo, to then go and get an affidavit from Fadel Adams? How do you jump from one to the other when she agrees that there was nothing in that letter that constituted a Section 27 referral? And even if there was, why didn't you go to Mr. Kabinde and not Fadel Adams? What is this need to head there to get that particular Section 27 affidavit, which we see later on through the evidence of Brian Pariachi actually doesn't even meet the Section 27 requirements itself as well. So the question then becomes, after getting these particular, or the information rather, if she's going to say that it had nothing to do with political interference with Minister Mchunu in that regard, then the Commission is now tasked with finding the true motivation behind the conduct that you see. And that is what we are warming up to. Keep in mind that there's a number of allegations floating about this particular case and the manner in which it was done and what the possible motive could be, and how this intelligence division is such a complex division within the South African Police Services, and how the Secret Service account or fund is something that there is a battle to have control over. And you have to keep those points in mind as we continue to advance on this particular evidence, which is now seemingly raising a lot of questions for Advocate Andrea Johnson, because at the very least that letter didn't say anything that would trigger her to go and get a statement from Fadil Adams. And even worse, when you get the Adams statement, it also doesn't trigger the Section 27 requirements in order to get to an investigation. And if the initial complaint was about the interception of his dockets, how then did you get to serious fraud and corruption charges that now go into the realm of the Secret Service account and the appointment of Brigadier Dineo Mokwele, and then ends up implicating all of these high-ranking generals within intelligence?
Yeah, so it was the police ministry that approached IDEC and not Fidel Adams, but that notwithstanding, IDEC goes to Fidel Adams to try to get the Section 27 affidavit. And perhaps let's take our viewer back to that point of the testimony where, after a lot of toing and froing, I must admit, Andrea Johnson ultimately does concede that IDEC, the institution she leads, is the one that went directly to Fadil Adams to try to solicit the Section 27 referral, and she later concedes that perhaps that wasn't proper conduct. Take a listen.
That document you're holding in your hand, IDEC solicited it from Mr. Adams. You received a letter from the minister. You then directed Mr. Perumal to act on that and contact Mr. Adams and
ask him for his...
Ask him. So you solicited a Section 27 affidavit from a would-be complainant.
I don't agree with the solicited.
Ma'am?
I don't agree with solicited. We would have asked him, because you see, I'm going into the detail that's not mine and not in my head, and I don't want to sound
yours. Like It's yours, Advocate Johnson. You are the one who gave an instruction to Chief Perumal to contact Mr. Adams. So Ms. Sillo's question relates to that. That has nothing to do. Mr. Perumal would then have been the actor on your instruction. That's where the question is. It has nothing to do with what Mr. Perumal then did down the line. So please do not deflect the question and refer to what Mr. Perumal would have done or not done. Can you please respond to the question?
Then we would have obtained the statement.
At your instance, that's the substance of the question.
That is correct.
That's what Ms. Sillo means when she says to you, so you solicited the affidavit, because what came out of your instruction that please contact Mr. Adams was the submission of the Section 27 affidavit. So it's on that basis that Ms. Sillo is suggesting to you, you solicited that affidavit. Do you now agree?
I agree.
As you sit here today, is that appropriate of IDEC to be soliciting complaints from members of the public on the basis of which then IDEC initiates investigations?
No, we're not supposed to solicit, and that is why I'm saying I tell Mr. Perumal to engage Mr. Adams. I don't know if this was a prepared affidavit already. It was to say to him, we received a letter from the minister. We are engaging you. So whether this was already prepared or not, at the time, we got this affidavit.
So there you have it. The IDEC head ultimately conceding that, in fact, it was the unit that went to Fadil Adams, and it seems this was on the basis of that letter. Let's bring in Kenny Mapanga once again, our senior reporter who's been here. And amongst the other issues that the chairperson seems to struggle with, Kenny, is the vagueness of this letter, he says. And he points to a different instance where Advocate Andrea Johnson didn't act because she perceived a particular complaint to be vague.
And the inference there, or the implication, is that there was an expectation on her as an IDEC head to at least gather some information to get through this vagueness that would have been identified, or at the very least, the vagueness should have actually halted her from proceeding with the obtaining of the Section 27 referral affidavit from Fadil Adams. But it didn't. She still proceeded, and they're trying to get through the thought process as to what motivated you to continue, even though you had nothing in the letter that could motivate saying that this was part of IDAC's mandate or jurisdiction. What then prompts you to proceed to Fadil Adams to get to that statement? And that is where we're at the heart of trying to understand what IDAC's conduct is, or what to make of IDAC's conduct in this whole particular saga, because nothing that is being flowed from this particular letter of the minister is making sense in terms of IDAC's mandate, the expectations of the IDAC head, and what triggers a Section 27 referral. And once those requirements are met, what then triggers the investigation. Everything is a bit in the air right now as we try to make sense of what Advocate Johnson is saying. But even with that information, it still doesn't make sense how a letter about the interception of documents relating to cases that you've opened in different police stations across the country then becomes a case about fraud and corruption against high-ranking generals within the Crime Intelligence Division. What must the Commission make of this spectacular jump in an investigation that actually didn't even meet the Section 27 requirements, did not engage your jurisdiction, and you still went out and solicited the affidavit from Fadil Adams? So certainly a lot of questions for Advocate Johnson to answer when she returns to the stand after the tea break.
And we look forward to it. Kenny Mapanga, thanks very much indeed. Kenny is our senior reporter who's been watching developments with us here from the Bridget Mabanda Justice College. The commissioners should be walking back in at 11:35, and I have no doubt that we'll continue watching those developments for you from that point throughout the course of the day.
All right, Ayanda, thank you very much for that reportage. SABC News anchor there, Ayanda Nyati, of course, alongside senior reporter Kenny Mapanga, both at the Bridget Mabanda Justice College.